Hello, and thank you for checking in to our ACANY and Life Plan virtual learning session for May 7th, 2026. This is Family Support Services, or FSS. FSS is a statewide grant-funded program through OPWDD that helps families support a loved one with an intellectual or developmental disability while living at home. The presentation offers a broad look at the variety of supports available through FSS programs across New York State, as well as how families and care teams can access them. Throughout this presentation, you'll learn what family support services are and how they support families statewide, who is eligible to use FSS and the types of supports that may be available, how FSS funding can be used to meet a range of family needs, including respite, goods, services, and emergency support, what the application, review, and approval process looks like. This presentation is intended for individuals and families, care managers, and professionals supporting people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in New York State who want a clearer understanding of family support services. We hope you find this session helpful and informative. Let's get started. Welcome everyone again, and I also want to welcome our presenter, Lindsay Paulin. She is from, and I always go to upstate when I say this, Racker. Okay, I always want to go Raker.
Yeah.
Like upstate, yeah, okay. Thank you. Take it away, Lindsay.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me again. And so many people call it Raker. It's Racker. We're named after Dr. Franziska Racker. And I'll tell you a little bit more about Racker, but for the most part today, what we'll be talking about is family support services programming in New York State. That's not exclusive to Racker. It is included here. It is a program that me and my team work through, but it's also available throughout New York State. So as you hear of, where Racker is and what areas we serve, just know that this program is applicable in your area as well. There are providers across the state. So what I'll be going over today is just the general guidance. And then you could take that information and go to your provider in your area to access this program. I do want to apologize in advance. My neighbors are getting a new roof. So if you hear some drilling or knocking, I can't control that part, unfortunately. And I do have dogs that hopefully are going to keep quiet. So a little bit, let me click through if it lets me. There we go. A little bit about me. So I am Lindsay Paulin. I am the home service director here at Racker. I started at Racker in 2014. I originally came to the agency to do direct care. So I did boots on the ground and working with families and working with folks living independently for the first time. I did that throughout COVID, and then it was time for a change, and I came over to Family Support Services. I currently oversee family reimbursement funding, which we'll talk about today. I also have a lending library and sensory room team, which is wonderful. We'll talk a tiny bit about that. I do service access assistance, so I help people go through the front door. And I also do integrated supportive housing and housing subsidies. So my team member, Chris, likes to joke that I'm not a hat on a hat. I'm an entire hat rack. I like to joke. It makes it so that Racker will never get rid of me. Because I'm here to stay. So a little bit about Racker. We've been around for 78 years. Not me personally, I'm not quite that old, but the agency has been here for 78 years. And like a lot of what you guys do, we support people with disabilities and their families. Racker in general has pretty much every sort of program you could think of. Except for we don't do employment support like formally. So we have preschools, we have daycares, we have programs inside of BOCES programs, we have community hub, we have family support, we have residential, and different housing options. So we do a little bit of everything. Our three main locations are in Ithaca, Cortland, and Owego. So we're some people would call us Central New York. Some people would call us Upstate. I like to say we're smack dab right in the middle of New York. And we serve many counties outside of those three cities. So we'll talk a little bit about footprints, but like I said, if you're not in our area, this information is still hopefully valuable to you. And you can take it back to whatever provider is in your area. And my dog is going to insist that I pet her this entire time. So if my arm looks funny, I'm petting her so that she doesn't scream. She's a husky. So a little bit about what Family Support Services is first. and then a little bit about what Family Reimbursement Funds is second. So Family Support Services, it's a mouthful, so we'll call it FSS today. It is a grant-funded program throughout New York State through the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities. Its goal is to provide programs and supports to families, hence family support, and to keep loved ones at home as long as possible. There are over 600 FSS agencies in New York State. Each one will offer an entirely unique blend of services. So you go to every coffee shop offers coffee, but every coffee that they make is slightly different. It's kind of the same way with our programs. We all operate under the grant, but we might brew our own blend slightly different. So what's available in New York City is not going to match what's here in the Finger Lakes, and it's not going to match what's out in Niagara Falls. However, you'll see some things have a common vein. The most popular FSS program is family reimbursement, which is what we're going to talk about today. And then some providers have a unique service that's a one and done, like our library. There's nothing like it in the state. So a little bit about who can use family support services. I know right off the bat, the majority of folks' questions are usually about self-direction. So I like to kind of get that right in the beginning, so you know that this information will be helpful and you know, aren't waiting for that answer. So first off, simple enough, you have to have eligibility through OPWDD. It can be provisional and it can be permanent. Either way, we accept it. We are for people of all ages. Currently, the youngest we support she just turned 3, and the oldest we support is about to turn 70. So runs the gambit of ages, runs the gambit of diagnosis. And the only other requirement is that you have to live full-time with a parent or caregiver. Because we are family support services, we cannot support those who live independently or in a certified residential setting. So that 70-year-old I was talking about, they live at home with their cousin. And because their cousin is their caregiver, they are eligible for family support services. If they were to live in that same family home solo, they wouldn't be eligible for the program. And the most important part for many people is, can people in self-direction use the program? And the answer is yeah. We do welcome those in self-direction through family support services. There is a caveat to that when it comes to reimbursement, which we're going to talk about, but families who use self-direction can use family support services as long as they follow that guidance. So we'll chat a little bit more about that. Here at Racker, like I said, everybody has their own blend. Shameless little plug for us. Got to do it. At Racker, we have 4 programs that fall under family support. The one you're going to hear about for the most part today is down here in the orange. That's Family Reimbursement Funding. We also do service access, helping families get through the front door. And for those that are not eligible for care management, maybe they're too young, maybe they aren't going to be Medicaid eligible or waiver eligible, they can stay on with me for light touch case management. We then have Supporting Success, which is a behavioral program working on safety and any sort of behavioral concerns. And then, like I said, we have that unique lending library and sensory rooms through which we offer different trainings and events. So other providers, they might have 1 FSS program, they might have 2, they might have 10. We have 4. So getting right into what is family reimbursement and how can families use it? Family Reimbursement Fund is a grant program throughout New York State that allows families to access up to $3,000 a year in qualifying reimbursements. Like I said, not specific to Racker, it's available across the state, and that money is to be divided up between all the FSS funding providers for that person. So if somebody lives in the Finger Lakes, they've been using Racker services, they've spent maybe $1,000 of that money, and then they opt to move to Rochester. They can still continue to use family reimbursement in Rochester. They just can't exceed the $3,000 between us 2 agencies. That $3,000 cap is only applicable for reimbursements. It's not applicable for things like behavioral programs, recreational programs, advocacy programs. Those are not part of the $3,000 caps. We're talking specifically about reimbursement. In addition to that $3,000 cap, there are occasionally options for emergency funding. There is no cap to how much someone can request through emergency funding. However, every situation and every agency approaching that emergency request is going to have its own tactic or its own guidance that it's going to have to go through. So I always say if someone has an emergency request, it's best to just immediately um, get in touch with the reimbursement provider and discuss the steps that you would need to cover. I'm going to get rid of this error message popping up. The steps that you're going to need to cover with them kind of proactively so that you don't go too far down the rabbit hole of gathering documents that maybe you don't need or not gathering the documents that the state is going to be asking for. We have had emergency requests as low as $400, and we've had emergency requests as high as 10,000. So every one of them is going to be incredibly individualized, but just know it is an option out there, and it just has to fall into certain categories, which we'll talk about in a bit. And it is a exception to that $3,000 cap that only exists once in a lifetime for that person. So say that person has an emergency home repair, it's a health and safety concern, there's no other options, and they get that emergency funded through this program, they can never ask for another emergency repair under that person's name again. So it's a one and done for lifetime. It is important to note that it is attached to the person who's eligible for services name, not the parent's name. So if that person were to then go under the care of, say they lived with a grandparent and then over time the grandparent ages and they live with a cousin instead, it doesn't reset because they live in a new household. It followed that person and was attached to them and their TABS number. So here at Racker for family reimbursement, we actually cover 7 counties. This is a little bit of an example when I say we're smack dab in the middle of the state. We cover Tompkins, Cortland, Tioga, Broome, Shenango, Otsego, and Delaware counties. We have had exceptions where we've been able to support folks outside of these areas if the providers in those areas have run out of funding. So if you're at all in our area and you're interested, Racker is here to help. If not, you can be in touch with your local OPWDD office to find out what FSS providers are in your area. Every local office has a list. I wish they were all like Region 2's list, which is an Excel sheet with all the information you could need. Some of them are a Word document, things like that. But every area in the state, every single county has to have at least one FSS provider. So each agency will have to follow the same standardized guidelines, but they might have slightly different approaches as well. They might have their own internal rules or their agency discretion, but we'll talk about the general overview of the guidelines today. So I personally like to break up FSS funding into 2 categories. It just makes it a little bit simpler in our minds and in our documenting. Some people would argue you could break it up into 3, but it's for our purposes, we do 2. So we'll start with Respite. Respite is the option to use that $3,000 or portion of it to help pay for some of the cost of temporary relief for a caregiver. It is absolutely not intended to cover average caregiving. It's not meant to be a long-term option. It's definitely not meant to take over or supplement a waiver program. Really, the families we're seeing use this the most are families that are not being served elsewhere and just need a brief, occasional break from caregiving. It is defined by OPWDD. They've been getting a little bit more strict about it, as it's a break for caregivers so they can rest, attend appointments, handle personal needs, spend time with another child in the household individually, something like that. It's something that you're supposed to be doing a handful of times a month or a handful of times a quarter. It's definitely not an everyday thing or a weekly schedule. We have had a couple families come through that want to use it every single day after school for 2 hours. That by definition is not respite. That's caregiving to the fullest extent. That is the average caregiver kind of burden of if you work longer than the school day, you have to find some sort of care. We have had people use it for emergencies or to plan for family events. Maybe mom wants to go out of town to a family wedding and really wants to go solo. She could hire somebody for the weekend to watch her kids so that she can travel. That would be something that would be occasional and infrequent. So that would be a good option. This is where that caveat for self-direction comes in. Family Support Services Respite is not available for self-direction. However, self-direction can use it for the second part we're going to talk about in a minute. We say that because self-direction should include the respite that that family is going to need. And if they use that respite in their budget, they can't then come over to FSS to use the remaining $3,000 in FSS in that budget. And I always like to know, just because someone puts FSS in their self-directed budget does not mean that they automatically get FSS. They're subjected to the exact same rules as everybody else. They just are including part of it in their budget. So we just wanted to kind of put that out there right on the get-go, that self-direction cannot use respite, but can use it for those goods and services we're going to talk about. And then for the most part, those who are on the waiver and have the ability to access waiver respite should not be using Family Support Services for respite unless they can demonstrate that the waiver is not able to serve them. And it can't be that the waiver is not able to serve them to the extent that they want. It has to be that the waiver can't serve them at all. If they are using waiver respite and they want additional respite, they need to increase their waiver respite. And they need to go through those avenues. They can still come over for goods and services, which we'll talk about, but they can't supplement a waiver service. It's in our guidance, unfortunately. And then families who are not on the waiver don't have to worry about that step at all. Families who are not on the waiver can just go ahead and apply for respite as they see fit. I have a little graphic in case it's helpful. I know that part is a little confusing. So essentially, if someone is not approved for the waiver, they can go ahead and apply straight for FSS. If someone is approved for the waiver, they must demonstrate that the waiver cannot serve them, and only then they can come to Family Support Services to request respite. It's worth noting when I say that they have to demonstrate the waiver can't serve them, they have to demonstrate that every waiver provider in their area can't serve them. So for example, in Ithaca, if someone were to be on the waiver and be interested in demonstrating that the waiver is not able to serve them for respite, they would need to contact Racker, Springbrook, Unity House, each of the providers in that county to prove that they are waitlisting or unable to serve families, which is the case in most of our counties. So we simply just need an email or some sort of note identifying that we're not able to be served through that waiver program at the time. And we do have some families that their respite provider wouldn't be able to be hired by a waiver agency or is not interested in being hired by a waiver agency. And that if we can document that, that sometimes is a way that we can get through that. So if someone's if someone's respite provider is their grandma and grandma really is not going to be willing to apply to work at an agency and go through background checks and all of that, and they would lose their respite provider by having to go the waiver route, they can sometimes demonstrate that and we can make an exception. So here we usually see respite coming through in two ways. An agency might not have both of these options, but we don't believe in having extra barriers, so we try to keep it open. So we have some families that apply for respite before respite has occurred. They're proactively planning that throughout the rest of 2026, I think I'm going to use $1,000 in respite. So they go ahead and they submit an application applying for up to $1,000, say it gets approved, and then throughout the year, they submit a verification form to be reimbursed for respite piece by piece. It's a nice peace of mind of knowing that you do have that pre-approval for that $1,000 or whatever you've requested. It's kind of set aside for you in a way, and you also would then be able to proactively plan for other things that you might request through things like goods and services. You can always adjust this amount if you haven't spent the money. You can say, oh, my respite provider wasn't able to do as often as I thought she would. So I want to reduce that $1,000 down to $500. And as long as you haven't spent it, you can do that. You can close out the application and reallocate that money somewhere else. This is our most popular way of using the program, just because families really do like to have that approval letter in hand, that as long as you're submitting the verification forms correctly, It's not, nothing's ever a guarantee, but it's a pretty strong indication that you're going to get reimbursed. And then we have some families that request respite after the fact. Um, maybe something came up over the weekend. They didn't anticipate having to pay the neighbor to watch their kid. Mom fell in the yard and sprained her ankle, had to go to the hospital, and the neighbor came over. You could then apply for respite and say, because we had this instance occur where we needed respite, I paid the neighbor $500 to watch my kid for that whole Saturday while I waited in the ER. And I'd like reimbursement for that. And we could have you apply for respite after the fact as well. We still would need the same documentation. We still would need that verification form filled out, but some people just choose to do it as a proactive measure. I kind of already gave two examples, but another two on the screen. The Smith family applies for in January for pre-approval for the full 3,000. Once they submitted that verification form, they then submit forms every single month for the care that they've used in that month. They take the entire year to use all $3,000 so that they're using it periodically and not in, an excessive manner. In January of the next year, they might plan to do the exact same thing. The benefits of this, they've only had to fill out one application for the entire year. No one likes paperwork. So it kind of cuts down on that. And then the con of it is that if you didn't use respite at all, you did kind of spend some time on paperwork that was not needed. We don't really see this very often. Usually if someone applies for respite, they're at least going to submit one verification form throughout the course of the year, get at least one reimbursement check. But it does have the possibility of happening. And then the second scenario, like I said, there's a scenario where someone has an emergency. They pay their neighbor to watch their son for the weekend. After they return, she applies to get reimbursed for that amount. The benefit of that is they only had to complete an application that they actually needed. The con of that is if for some reason they didn't follow the guidance and that application was denied, they did spend that money out of their own pocket with no indication that it would be reimbursed necessarily. For the most part, we don't see a lot of respite get denied, but it does happen. So we just like to remind families that nothing is a guarantee until we let you know that that check is coming in the mail. I'm going to take a second, take a sip of water. Some last minute important notes about respite. Regardless of who your provider is, whether it's RACR or anywhere's, reimbursement's never going to be a guarantee. We do need that proper documentation for respite. And it needs to be done in an allowable time frame. So we can't accept respite applications or forms from 2025 anymore. Once January 1st hit, we can't accept that anymore. We do also have to follow the guidelines of the person providing respite has to be at least 18 years old. That's a relatively new rule. A couple of years ago, they could be 16, 17. They must live outside of the family's home. We can't pay anyone under that roof to provide care for that person. And then they must be paid at least minimum wage up to the county's respite rate. So for example, in Ithaca area, that is a minimum of $16 an hour up to $25 an hour. Anything that they pay over $25, we cannot reimburse. So it's going to come out of their own pocket. And if they were to pay under $16, they would have to reconcile that with their respite provider, resubmit that verification form for a minimum of 16. That'll be a little bit different everywhere. I know obviously county respite rates are going to change drastically between the Finger Lakes area and places like New York City. So, and then another important note about respite is if you do get to the end of the year and you have not used that $3,000 or whatever amount that you've requested, it's not going to roll over into the new year. So you want to maybe think of reallocating it to a different need. And also just know that some providers, if their contract is relatively small, they might run out of funding. It's really encouraged that we don't over approve for the amount of money that's in our bucket. We're not promising $1 million when we don't have $1 million in our bucket. But, some agencies, they do overshoot a little bit to have a buffer in case people don't spend that money. So in the case of a provider running out of money, that family, because the money follows the person, can go to another provider to get the remaining amount up to that 3,000. Um, Here at Racker, it doesn't really happen except for a couple of years ago, only in one county that we serve. It's on its own contract. It ran out of money. And we notified all of the families via letter. That's kind of best practice. And we also um, gave them a list of all the other providers in their area because we didn't want them to go without. We felt bad that we couldn't serve them. It was the year that the ADM guidance came out, so they let us reset money. It got a little messy, but for the most part, we really do try to plan ahead. And in the event that it happens, it's best practice for that provider to get you connected with another provider. So, the other side of this, for those that don't want to use respite or are not eligible to use respite, those that are in waiver programs or in self-direction, how can they use this $3,000 a year in FSS funding? Um, Oh, I did kind of already touch on this. Like I said, self-direction can use it. This should have been a bit earlier. Self-direction can use this funding for goods and services, not respite. However, they only can use it on items that are ineligible for self-directed funding. If it's something that self-direction can pay for, they should use self-direction to pay for it. If it's something that self-direction cannot pay for, we're here to help. Like I said before, having us included in your budget is not a guarantee that FSS is going to approve it. You have to go through the same process as everyone else. Um, and in the case where we say something isn't being funded by self-direction, it can't simply be that you don't want to move money onto that line or you've run out of money on that line of your budget. It must be that self-direction under any circumstances wouldn't cover that item. It's not eligible at all. If it's something that self-direction can cover, use self-direction to cover it and come to us for something else. So those goods and services, we see this as more of a growing use of the program, especially as respite has changed over the last few years. That we do have a lot of families that either use a blend of respite and goods and services or use it all for goods and services. We're able to help pay for some of the cost of items that are related to the person's specific disability, sensory items, adaptive items, adaptive clothing has been really popular lately, and then those services that we're going to talk about in the next slide. Sadly, after 2022, when the newest guidance came out, we cannot fund things solely based on economic hardship. It used to be the case back then, but now it has to be specifically related to their OPWDD diagnosis. It can't just be that they don't have this essential need in their life being met, which I can give you some examples of. Each individual item, it will need to be outlined on its own application because it will need its own kind of justification and backing to it. So if you're going to request 4 items, you're going to need 4 applications. I say that, but if you're thinking of something like we want to request a packet of chewies, my child, likes to chew on things. They chew on their clothes. We'd like to get them some of those silicone chewies. If that pack of chewies is a 5-pack, you don't have to submit 5 applications for it. It's 1 application for a 5-pack of chewies, then that sort of thing. But if it's unique items, they'll have to be divided up. So some of the items we're seeing the most popular in the last year or two, things like yoga bows and bean bags, crash pads, cozy canoes, some people call them pea pods. We fund those quite often. Adaptive shoes and clothing, so long as it is adaptive in nature and not just replacement clothing. We can fund those typically. Billy shoes, which is the shoe with the pink zipper there. Those are pretty popular. At some point, we should get some sort of discount code for them because we send a lot of families their way. Fidget items, sensory lights. Those are all things that we fund often. Last year, especially really popular for those convertible couches. Some people call them nugget couches. Single person trampolines, lots of weighted items, weighted vests, compression clothing, all of that is definitely an option. Honestly, there's not a limit of how affordable an item can be. We've funded items that were literally $4 before, and reimbursed the family. And then, if you find an item that is up to $3,000, you could hypothetically request it for one big ticket item. It has been coming up quite a bit, and I'll show you the non-allowable list. We do fund things like sensory swings. We do not fund swing sets. So it cannot be an outdoor jungle gym swing set, but we do see sensory swings quite often. That's a question we get. It just can't be an entire like play set outside. And then on the other side of that is services. So not only do we fund items related to people's disabilities, but we also fund different types of therapies, different types of programming and services related to people's quality of life and disability. So in addition to funding items, we fund things like camps, dance classes, karate lessons, music lessons are incredibly popular out here. Different types of art classes and cooking classes, which I'm always very jealous of. Pottery is really popular. We had someone do a glass blowing class, so jealous of that. I wanted to go. Horseback riding and equine therapy is really popular out here as well. Swimming classes and lessons, both for safety, for risk of drowning concerns, but also for movement and health goals. Those classes for swimming can be group classes or individualized lessons. We can fund either. Different gyms, CrossFit, YMCA memberships. However, we cannot fund personal trainers. So it can't be that you are going to a gym and you're paying for a personal trainer at that gym. We could help you pay for the membership, but for that trainer, you'd have to pay separate. And then in addition to our own list of successes, which every year we try to send out a little graphic of all the things we funded that year, just to kind of spark people's ideas. When when you've been in the program for so many years, you start to wonder, I don't use it for respite. I already have a crash pad. What could I use it for? We like to give out a list of things that we're seeing approvals for. So in addition to our list, there is an OPWDD list. It's not nearly as pretty. It's just black and white, but they do give us a list of things that are allowable. It is by no means a complete list. Really, what you want to focus on is what's on the non-allowable list, which is the next slide. If it's on the allowable list, great. But if you think of something that's not on any of these lists, it's still a possibility that we can explore. So I won't read through the whole list. It is available online. I'll just touch on a couple of things, the things that I've mentioned, obviously, but also things like we have funded mattresses. If it was something as a result of incontinence or a sensory, maybe they stim and they rip their mattress apart or something like that. In certain cases, we can fund a mattress cover, a box spring, but we cannot fund furniture. So we wouldn't be able to buy you the bed frame. It's a little silly, but we can replace the mattress part. We have funded supplements, which we were very shocked about. That was a pretty big ask of somebody. It was actually from Self-Direction. Self-Direction wouldn't cover supplements. A doctor is recommending these supplements. And we were able to get them approved for the entire year. So every single month when the mom goes and replaces the supplements, she sends us the invoice. And it is a substantial amount in that person's case. I want to say it's about $140 a month in supplements. So we're able to reimburse them every month, even though they are in Self-Direction. So that's a pretty good example of that program. And like I said, there's lots of other things on the list. I will show you at the end how to get these lists for yourself, but I can also send them along if Life Plan would like to share them as well. The more important part, I apologize, I've been talking a lot this week. This list is subject to change, but the more important part, not the allowable list, but the non-allowable list. This is where we run into a hard no. No matter what way we would explain why we think it's justified, these items are not going to be covered. Some of them are very obvious, things like luxury vacations. We're not buying anyone a pool or a hot tub or anything like that. We don't cover cars. We don't purchase vehicles like that. So if it's on the non-allowable list, it's just kind of unfortunately a dead end for us. If it's not on this list, with the right justification, we can usually try to find a way to get it approved. And I think a lot of FSS providers feel that way in that it's a win-win for everybody. We want families to access this money. We want to spend our bucket of money to show the state that we're doing our job. And the state wants, well, the local offices want these FSS programs to be successful so that they stay in their jobs. It's more so, the penny pinchers and the New York State budgets that get a little bit more, save money kind of energy. So, um, like I said, I will show you on an upcoming slide where to find the information for um, the non-allowable list, the allowable list, and the application. This list is subject to change. It has not changed since last June, thankfully, but we do recommend you check into it often just to be safe. And providers will provide it to you as well. And just because we funded something in the past, especially before 2022, doesn't mean we can fund it now, unfortunately. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the last little bit is that emergency request. These are the categories, this once in a lifetime per category. So rent, mortgage, and utility payments. Well, technically rent and mortgage is one category. Utilities is another category. Emergency food is one category. Pest control in any form. So if you got extermination for bed bugs and a couple years later you're having an issue with cockroaches, you've already gotten your one-time pest control. Just because it's a different bug doesn't make it a new option, unfortunately. Home maintenance and emergency respite. In those cases, just contact your local FSS provider. We're going to walk hand in hand through that request together. I know that's a lot of information, I promise. It's not a list that you have to memorize by any means. The FSS provider, we know them backwards and forwards nowadays. We can usually quote them pretty easily. When in doubt, talk to your provider, but also it's available online on the landing page. So I wanted to take a couple minutes. I know that I'm a certified yapper, so I do talk quite a bit, to just talk about the review process itself. It is going to be these same 3 steps regardless of what agency you go through. It's just a matter of what the timeline is for them. Some agencies review requests once a month, some do it once a quarter, some are very lucky and do it once a week. So the process is you fill out the FSS application. It's available on the landing page that I'll show you in a minute, but also providers are happy to send it out usually. It does have a checklist on page 2 of it of the documents that need to be included depending on the type of request. So as long as you go through the application step by step, don't skip anything, you then go ahead and submit it to your FSS provider in your region, along with a copy of your life plan. And that FSS provider will present it to a committee. Every single provider is required to have a committee making up of specific types of members. Has to be external, internal, it has to be a family member, an advocate. We deal with all of that. You don't have to worry about it. And we are basically just making sure that it is not immediately violating any of the guidance that we're subjected to. It's followed all the rules. It matches our OPWDD guidance through the ADM. And our committee is just confirming that, in our case, me and Marlene didn't make a huge hiccup. It's essentially saving the state from having to look at things that are automatically ineligible. If a request is denied at this stage, the family is going to be notified and they have the ability to appeal that request with the agency themselves. If it's approved, it goes on to OPWDD for the final review and approval, hopefully. We do that by submitting it on a giant Excel tracker. I last counted, I think it has like 37 rows or something silly. And it's just basically asking us to provide all the information in one concise strip of details. The state's going to review that information. They're going to reach out if they have additional questions, or they're going to send back an approval or a denial. In our region, we meet every single week on Tuesday morning. We send them the tracker on Wednesday morning, and usually by Friday afternoon, we have an answer. Sometimes Monday, people take the day off, that kind of thing, but it's pretty fast out here. In areas where there's a lot more providers, like New York City, it might be considerably slower. If OPWDD does not approve a request and they deny it, there is a process for an appeal. It's not a final decision until you can go through the appeal process. And we have had some families reverse that decision. So if it's denied at RACR in that committee stage, you can appeal with RACR. And ultimately, you can appeal with OPWDD if you disagree with our decision. If it's denied with OPWDD, you have to appeal it with OPWDD. And then when appealing in either context, whether it's the agency denied it or OPWDD does, you do have to address the reason it was denied. So if we say, oh, well, you have to explore this other funding avenue before you were to come over here, if you can prove you've explored that and you present it to us, that's the information we're going to use to see if we can reverse that. And I just wanted to make a note, like I said, that's just the RACR process. That might be slightly different at each agency. And then if something's approved, amazing. Easy enough. You're going to be notified in writing. And usually it's best practice to also notify you of those guidance for respite and things like that again, just so that you have it in writing in one place. If you are approved for respite, you're going to be given that verification form, which is basically just a time sheet. It says when respite started, when respite ended, your hourly rate, and the total amount that you're paying, just so we can track it all. If you feel like I sped through this, I understand. I wanted to also give you the guidance just in case. Usually what I do is I quick Google OPWDD FSS ADM. It pulls up the entire landing page. I also included it as a QR code here, which I'll pause on. And then you can visit OPWDD's website. And you can see all of these approval or these allowable, non-allowable lists. You can see the entire 12-page ADM if you really wanted to read it and put yourself to sleep. It's available there. There's the applications on that page. There's the verification forms on that page. And they are working on making them in multiple languages, finally. So if you're working with a family who needs it in Arabic, it's available on there in Arabic as well. So, and I will make sure this presentation gets sent along to LifePlan so they can share it as well.
Thank you. And I just want to note too, we have a lovely number of documents that we can also send along in that follow-up email. And if you need help, your care manager is the best contact to help you with this. And also the member relations department has, taken a very big part in helping families that do not have the HCBS waiver, the Medicaid waiver yet, in helping get them started in this process. So I'll follow up in an email with all these things. Take it back away, Lindsay.
Yes, thank you so much. And it is a team effort. It works best when all of us collectively come together. It's for the greater good of families. It's also for the greater good of every single provider. Your care manager wants to be helpful. We want to use our money and prove to OPWDD that these programs are important and we don't want these funding programs to be cut. And you want money in your pocket for items that you can buy for your loved ones or for services. So it helps everybody. We all can come to the table together for a mutual good of using these programs up. So my last kind of closing remark is if you are in our area and you're able to get RACR services, we have a really unique option here at RACR because we have such a continuum of family support services that some people actually can use one of our family support programs to feed into reimbursement, which is the best possible way for these to work. And if you have something in your area where you have a behavioral program and a funding program, they can work side by side in that common topic of collaboration and working together. So say we have a family that's enrolled in our lending library, they borrow a crash pad, they find success in that crash pad. The lending library really should be referring them to the funding program to get a crash pad funded for themselves. That is the perfect example of those programs coming together in a partnership. And in reality, when it's really perfect, maybe it is that their behavior specialist recommended the crash pad, the lending library loaned them the crash pad, they found success, and the funding program then can help them purchase the crash pad for themselves. And in the meantime, you're borrowing the crash pad while you wait for that answer or wait for shipping. In certain very rare scenarios, all 4 of our programs come together where I get them through the front door, get them to behavior support, get them to the library, get them to funding, which is really nice when we can all be together in that synergy. But it doesn't always happen where all 4 of us do. And we do this with other FSS providers. So it might be that there's a behavioral support staff at an agency over in Delaware County that then knows that they could borrow a crash pad and get it funded back at their own agency. So we work with outside providers as well. And that is a speed run of what Family Support Services Family Reimbursement is. We welcome questions, even if you don't end up here at RACR for funding. Like I said, it's for the greater good of FSS. We want these programs to be around as long as possible. So we're always here to help other providers, families, care managers, just kind of get the full extent of these programs. So, and I will... Oh, let me check my time. Oh, it's 12:46. That wasn't so bad. I'm going to stop my screen share. So if there's any questions I didn't get, I'm going to have to switch these.
There was a number of questions in the chat, so I'm going to scroll up here.
Hopefully I got to some of them naturally.
Yeah, I think you did. Let's see.
Let's see here.
So Emanuela asked, how do you apply for pre-approval for Respite? Is it offered from all agencies? And I believe you did touch on that. It is based agency by agency.
Yeah, most agencies do that because in reality, it's kind of our preferred method. But yeah, it would be specific to the agencies in your area. And you could just ask them, can I get pre-approved for a certain dollar amount of respite, or do I have to request it after the fact? But I would say the vast majority of respite FSS providers are doing it proactively like that.
All right. Can I just add to Lindsay? Your care manager, if you're enrolled with a CCO, either Life Plan or ACA, your care manager might have a good idea of an agency that will do that. So you don't have to call around to all of the agencies to ask that question. Definitely start with your care manager. And if you don't have a care manager, Kate put the member relations email address in the chat, and we work with FSS on a daily basis. So we'll be able to point you in the direction of an agency that is willing to do that. And sometimes agencies will pay, especially for goods and services, sometimes agencies will pay a vendor directly. So if it's a financial hardship to, not for respite, but say you're looking for a YMCA membership and it's a financial hardship for you to pay and wait for reimbursement, oftentimes we can find an agency that will pay the YMCA directly on your behalf. So definitely ask about those things to your care manager. And I did see another question in the chat from someone asking if it's true that you don't have to have a care manager for FSS, and that is true. Yeah. So you do not need to have a care manager to access family support services. You don't have to have a life plan document. You don't have to have Medicaid. So if that's something you need help with, then please reach out to us in the member relations department, and we're happy to help with that.
Yes, absolutely. And just to kind of circle back a tiny bit, the paying a vendor directly or purchasing an item directly for a family, it is required in our guidance that every FSS reimbursement provider have an avenue for direct purchasing. It's just a matter of if you qualify for it based on, whatever the situation is, but we all are required to have an avenue. It's just a matter of how extensive can that be. So, we will sometimes purchase an item and have it shipped directly to you, but because we don't cover tax and shipping, you're going to have to reimburse for tax and shipping before we can do that. So it's all about kind of communicating that need, especially before applying or as you're applying, so we can proactively plan with you to purchase that item for you or pay for that service directly. But yeah, we're all required to have some avenue of it. So a provider can't say we never do that. Well, we do that in certain situations. We're required to. So
thank you. There was a follow-up to the respite question. And I'm not sure if you touched on this. Can a parent set the rate, or is it preset pay, which I think is a good question?
The parent gets to set the rate, or the parent or caregiver. Like I said, it just has to be between that range. It has to be at least minimum wage. So in New York City's different. The rest of New York State has to be at least $16 an hour, and it has to be below your county's rate. And a good FSS provider, its best practice would be to tell you what that range is in your approval letter. So ours will say you must pay between $16 and $25 an hour. But if in your area it's between $16 and $20 an hour, they really should include that in your approval letter. But otherwise, you get to set the rate and you get to change it. So if you're like, this one I gave my provider no notice, I'm going to pay her an extra $1 an hour because, you know, she came through in a pinch for me, or something along those lines. So you can change it as much as you want. Every line on that verification form is going to ask you what the hourly rate you paid for that day is. Yep. And you get to pick your provider. Besides that, they have to be 18 and live somewhere else. You don't have to have any relationship with them. They don't have to be a family member. They could be someone you hired on care.com. They could be your neighbor. They could be someone from church. You get to have a say in who that person is and who you trust with your loved one.
Thank you. All right. Regina had a question about picking an after-school program for her granddaughter. And Regina, your care manager would be the perfect person if you have one, if you're working with one. And if not, reach out to our member relations department, and we can help you navigate how you can get support through FSS and then maybe outside of FSS if that's what you're needing.
Yep. And there are some folks in the state who have FSS programs that are after school programs. So it might be that you do see family support as being an option for you. And it might be that you see your city or your county or your school or someone that has a good option for you. But yeah, your care manager is going to have all the tips for that area.
Okay. Can your respite provider be the same person who provides respite through self-direction? And I know you did touch on that in the beginning, but if you want to just kind of.
Yeah, so if you have self-direction, you have to use respite through self-direction. So even if you exhaust your budget over there, say you have $3,000 in your self-directed budget for respite, if you use that $3,000 up, you can't come to family support for more respite. You can come to family support for goods and services, but you can't have respite double, because that would be considered supplementing self-direction, and we can't supplement any program. So if you are in traditional services and you're moving into self-direction, you could keep your respite provider when you go over there, but you can't use both of the programs simultaneously or to supplement each other.
Thank you. All right. Are camps funded? We just talked about that. Some programs can have camps funded under FSS. Play therapy. We hear this a lot. People ask about ABA and play therapies.
Yep. As long as it's not a therapeutic service that is covered by your insurance, we can consider it. So we've had some folks who have come through for specialized physical therapy, equine therapy, music therapy, that kind of stuff. As long as you can demonstrate that your insurance doesn't cover it, we can entertain an application for that. If your insurance covers it and you just wanted to go to another provider that is private pay, because insurance would have covered it, we wouldn't be able to, because insurance should have been your avenue in that way. So we have had someone who wanted to go to a very fancy physical therapist and not the one that insurance would cover. Unfortunately, because you had an avenue, we are supposed to be funder of last resort. So you should have used the insurance.
And kind of in that same vein, FSS won't reimburse copays. So if your insurance covers ABA or PT or speech or whatever the case may be, but you have to pay a copay, that's also not reimbursable through FSS.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And also travel for those things. We can't reimburse for the travel to get to those services anymore. It used to be we could, but.
Okay. All right. I would like my daughter to learn personal defense class. Does this class fall under the program?
Yeah, yep, that would fall under the same category of karate, martial arts. We've even had someone go to a lightsaber course, which is considered martial arts. It looks so fun. We've had rock climbing and trampoline gyms and things like that. So yeah, self-defense would be an avenue, especially if you could tie it into not only independence, but also health and fitness, safety. There's so many ways you can approach that one.
I see a question too, maybe, I don't know if maybe we skipped it, but Lauren's wondering, so those enrolled in HCBS waiver can access FSS funds for goods and services. Yes,
Mhm.
and they can access for respite as well. It's just a little more, you kind of have to prove a little bit more. So if someone is approved for waiver respite and they have those units authorized, you have to go to every single agency that provides waiver respite in that area and ask them to provide the respite. So maybe that means you're on a wait list or they're not taking any new people, or you have to demonstrate that you've tried to use those waiver respite units before applying for respite reimbursement with FSS.
Yes, absolutely. And in case I didn't mention it or haven't driven it home enough, you don't have to use the $3,000 in any one of those categories. You can use it $1,000 for respite, $500 for a crash pad, and then the remaining amount for a gym membership or a class or something like that. You can divide it up every single year however you want. So if you are using it for respite and then suddenly you're able to get into a waiver program, you can just switch gears and use whatever unused funds in a good or a service then. So you can kind of choose your own adventure with that funding every year. And in our area, it resets every January 1st. In New York City, it resets July 1st. It's a little strange out there. So if you're in the boroughs of New York City, it resets pretty soon here. So make sure you use it up if you can.
I have a really good question here, Lindsay. Sorry, Kate. I
No,
don't want
you're
to cut you off,
good.
but I just want to make sure we can answer it because I'm not sure of this answer. What is the eligibility for this service for families that have mixed immigration status? Like a citizen, the child is a citizen, but non-immigration status for the parents.
Yep. So because it's all tied to the child's OPWDD eligibility and TABS number, we have lots of families, especially in Ithaca. We are a melting pot. We have so many families that have mixed immigration status, and we can absolutely support the child as long as the child has OPWDD eligibility. It does not matter what the status is of the parents. And we have seen some folks come through and get OPWDD eligibility without their social security number. So if you have someone who immigrated here who does not have a social security number, it is a possibility to also get them eligibility. It's just a little bit trickier through the front door process. So as long as the kid is able to get through that front door process, we would serve a family regardless of what the parent status is. That's a great question.
Yeah, that is a great question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think an important point to make too, and I don't think we're going to get to all of the questions, but Kate, can you please put our email addresses in the
Yes,
chat again? And
absolutely.
everybody, please feel free to reach out to us if you have specific questions about FSS, or if you have concerns about care management, or you're feeling like you're not getting the support that you need from your care manager. Part of our role here on the member relations team is to get everybody on the same page and offer support to the care management team as well. So one important point that I want to make is that we've talked a lot about this bucket of family support service reimbursement, and then this other bucket of like programmatic FSS things, right? Like behavioral support or summer camps or recreation programs. The $3,000 limit is only applicable to reimbursement. So you could be, your child or your loved one could be eligible for $3,000 in reimbursement funds in addition to other FSS programming that is not reimbursement based. And those depend on where you live. So again, if you have questions about your specific area and you want the regional list of FSS programs, you can reach out to us in member relations and we can share that with you and your care manager. So we're kind of like the subject matter experts on FSS by default at the CCO. So we're happy to help with that. And we also have direct connection to Lindsay if we have questions, because she's like the real expert.
Well, I appreciate that. That's very sweet of you.
This is Lindsay's third year back, so
I know. I'm like, every year, I'm like, are they gonna Are they going to be like, we're done with you, Lynn? No, I'm always happy to help. And I also highly recommend getting involved in your local FSS councils if you're interested. I sit on the Broome Region 1 here at Racker. The statewide co-chair is part of Racker. So we're very FSS forward. We love our programs. Obviously, we all want to keep our jobs as well. So we want FSS to exist for a long time, not just because of Racker, but because, I mean, last year, I think we supported 425 families in funding. So it's a pretty big footprint, and we want to make a difference and put that money back into families' pockets, especially with the cost of everything nowadays. So we want to help, and I know care managers want to help, and we want to work in partnership together. So if you have questions, absolutely seek out your care manager, member relations, reach out to Racker. We're happy to help. And your local DDRO office is always there as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. So please, everyone, keep your eye out for an email with all of the information, a link to the recording. We're going to have the presentation. I'll send the allowable list. You'll have our contact information if you need additional help. So keep your eye out for that. You're going to get all the things. I want to thank you all so much for being here. Please contact our member relations department or your care manager. And thank you so much to Lindsley again for bringing all this great information. You're so smart and you know all the things. So we appreciate it.
You're so sweet. Well, thank you so much for having me back, and I will be here again on the 19th for part 2
in the evening,
6 p.m. Tell your friends.
Yeah, if anyone wants to listen again, I'm a certified yapper. I'll do it again.
All right. Thank you all so much. Have a great day. Welcome.